Welcome to Concept Craft. We are presenting step-by-step videos training to crack your certification exam, so you can gain the confidence to take on any accounting challenge. Now let's begin our today's lesson. New training on period-end activities. Learning outcomes. In this lesson, we'll cover new training for period-end activities. Topics: using the Books Review Center at year-end. Using the Books Review Center for troubleshooting account balances. The Reclassified Transactions tool. Using the Reclassified Transactions tool. Setting a closing date and password. The exceptions to closing date report. Running the exceptions to closing date report. QuickBooks Online has a range of tools and features to help you carry out period-end reviews accurately and painlessly. Some of these tools and features have been enhanced in the last year, and the certification training has been updated accordingly. In this lesson, we'll share the new training on using the Books Review Center at year-end. Using the Reclassified Transactions tool. Setting a closing date and password. Running the exceptions to closing date report after the books have been closed. Using the Books Review Center at year-end. Let's start with the Books Review Center, which you can launch from the left-hand navigation in QuickBooks Online Accountant. You may already be familiar with this feature, but you may not be aware of how it can help you carry out year-end reviews. The Books Review Center pulls all the period-end tasks together into a single place. It also lists any transactions with potential issues. In most cases, the 5 tabs of the Books Review Center provide the checklists and tools you need to complete the listed tasks for that part of the review. Select the headings to explore the year-end tasks that you can and can't complete from the Books Review Center. What tasks can you do from Books Review? What tasks can't you do? What tasks can you do from Books Review? You can use the Books Review Center to carry out the majority of fundamental year-end review tasks that apply to most QuickBooks Online companies. These tasks are listed in the table below. Year-end task. Which tabs in Books Review? Review key year-end reports, profit and loss, balance sheet. Note that you'll need these reports to help you carry out the next 2 tasks in this list. Setup. Final review. Ensure transactions are categorized correctly. Transaction review. Account reconciliation. Final review. Analyze fixed asset purchases and depreciation expenses. Final review. Evaluate accounts receivable, A/R, and accounts payable, A/P. Final review. Ensure that account reconciliations are up to date. Account reconciliation. Produce any management reports. Wrap up. What tasks can't you do? Some year-end tasks are outside the capabilities of Books Review at this time. For example, review any sales tax liabilities and payments. Submit W-2 and 1099 forms. Record mileage at year-end. Where can you go to complete these year-end tasks? If a task isn't included in the Books Review Center by default, you can add it to the Additional Items section of the relevant tab, either as a simple to-do item or with a hyperlink to the relevant area in QuickBooks Online. As well as the Books Review Center, the other key areas where you'll find the reports and tools to help you carry out year-end activities are the Reports Center in QuickBooks Online and Accountant Tools in QuickBooks Online Accountant. Pro Advisor Tip. For more guidance and advice, follow these links. Year-end Guide for QuickBooks Online. Reviewing your client's books in QuickBooks Online Accountant. Using the Books Review Center for troubleshooting account balances. One of the key tasks you need to do at year-end is review account balances. Previously, this might have been a time-consuming activity. However, the Books Review Center can help with the troubleshooting process by pulling together lists of transactions with potential issues. You'll find what you need in the following tabs of the Books Review Center. Transaction Review. Account Reconciliation. Final Review. Select each tab to learn more about using the Books Review Center for troubleshooting account balances. Transaction Review tab. Account Reconciliation tab. Final Review tab. Transaction Review tab. The Transaction Review tab automatically finds errors such as unapplied customer or vendor payments and remaining balances in undeposited funds/payments to deposit for the period. To help you troubleshoot the balance sheet at transaction level, review the following. The Bank Transactions section, which lists unaccepted bank fee transactions that QuickBooks Online identified. The Uncategorized Transactions section, which lists transactions to be classified. These are transactions that have been posted to the QuickBooks Online setup accounts: uncategorized income, uncategorized expense, and uncategorized asset. The Undeposited Funds/Payments to Deposit section, which shows customer payments that haven't been deposited. The Unapplied Payments section, which lists customer and vendor payments with no assignment to an invoice or bill. Account Reconciliation tab. The Account Reconciliation tab shows the current status of accounts and the number of unreconciled transactions. From here, you can ensure that all the appropriate balance sheet accounts are reconciled. To do this, review the following: the reconciliation status of the bank and credit card accounts, as well as other balance sheet accounts that should be reconciled. You can choose which accounts to include on this list by clicking Select Accounts. The outstanding transactions that have not cleared in 90 days or more and may need to be voided. Final Review tab. The Final Review tab prompts you to investigate unusual and unexpected balance sheet balances and to review the financial statements for accuracy. From this screen, review the following: accounts payable transactions that are over 90 days old. Accounts receivable transactions that are over 90 days old. Find out more about writing off old balances in the Write Off Invoices lesson. Follow the review balance sheet link that you'll find at the bottom of the screen to open it and investigate unusual and unexpected balances. The Reclassified Transactions tool. Now let's look at another feature of QuickBooks Online that's now covered in the certification training. During a period-end review, you may find transactions that were incorrectly categorized. In some cases, there could be a large number of these miscategorized transactions, and they take a long time to correct individually. This is where the Reclassified Transactions tool comes in. It allows you to reclassify large batches of transactions in one go, saving considerable time and effort. You can use the tool to reclassify transactions by account, as well as class and location, if the client has the relevant tracking feature turned on. How do you launch the Reclassified Transactions tool? The tool is only available to accountant users using QuickBooks Online Accountant and clients who use QuickBooks Online Advanced, provided they have the appropriate permissions. To open the tool, select Reclassified Transactions from Accountant Tools. Exploring the Reclassified Transactions tool. The Reclassified Transactions tool provides a variety of search options to enable you to find transactions that need reclassifying. Select each highlighted area to find out more about the search and filter options of the Reclassified Transactions tool. The left-hand panel allows you to search for and locate accounts in the client's company. Use the Account Types drop-down to specify if you want to look at profit and loss or balance sheet accounts. Also, specify whether to look at transactions in the selected accounts based on the accounting basis, cash or accrual. To see all transactions in the accounts, choose Accrual. If you're looking for a specific general ledger account, enter the account name in the search box. In this section of the panel, QuickBooks Online lists all the available accounts for the criteria you selected using the filters above. Selecting an account here refines the transaction list on the right so it only displays the transactions for that account. Use this section to set the date range for your search. Additional filter tools allow you to refine your search by transaction type and/or customer or vendor. The Modify filter allows you to filter out any transactions that you can't modify using the Reclassified Transactions tool. Any accounts you select from the list in the left-hand panel are shown here. Selecting X next to an account name resets the search results so it's not filtering transactions by that account. Selecting Find Transactions instructs QuickBooks Online to look for transactions that match your search settings. Transactions that match your search settings are listed here. You can then review and reclassify them, as you'll see next. Using the Reclassified Transactions tool. Let's see how to use the Reclassified Transactions tool to fix a miscategorized transaction. From the Client dashboard, select Accountant Tools, then Reclassify Transactions. In the Account Types field, select either Balance Sheet or Profit and Loss. Check the basis of the transaction, either accrual or cash. In the From and To fields, set the range of the transactions if needed. You can set further parameters, such as selecting the account or transaction type, or even searching for a specific class or location, if they're in use. Select Find Transactions. The left pane shows all of the available accounts, along with any sub-accounts for the selected criteria. Selecting an account would show all the transactions for that account in the right pane. From the left pane, select the account where the miscategorized transaction is. Check the box next to the miscategorized item in the right pane. Next, select Reclassify. In the Change Account to drop-down, select the correct account. Select Apply. The transaction has been reclassified. You can also use this function to reclassify in batch and save time. Limitations of the Reclassified Transactions tool. Although you can use the Reclassified Transactions tool in most situations, there are some limitations on when you can use it and what you can use it for. Select the questions to discover more about these limitations. What are the limitations on the data you can change for a transaction? There are some limitations on what you can change using the Reclassified Transactions tool. For example, you can't change the payment account, bank, or credit card for expenses. You can't change the account for inventory adjustments because they're connected to your inventory shrinkage and asset accounts. You can change the expense account for billable expenses, but not the income account for the related income transactions. In addition, there are restrictions on how you can reclassify certain transactions. For example, transactions that don't contain a customer name can't be reclassified to accounts receivable, A/R. Transactions that don't contain a vendor name can't be reclassified to accounts payable, A/P. What types of transactions can't be reclassified? The following transactions can't be reclassified with the Reclassified Transactions tool. Transaction type. Why can't you reclassify it using the tool? Sales tax transactions. Tax payments and tax adjustments are controlled by tax settings. Inventory adjustments. Inventory adjustments are product-/service-based transactions, and only general ledger accounts can be reclassified. Billable expense transactions in the income account. The income account is set in Account and Settings. Payroll transactions. These are controlled by the payroll settings. Product-/service-based transactions, invoices, sales receipts, checks, and/or bills using the item details grid. Only general ledger accounts can be reclassified. How do you know which transactions you can reclassify with the tool? When you use the Modify filter to change accounts, you'll only see transactions for which the account can be changed. Setting a closing date and password. Now let's look at one more thing that's now covered in the certification training and exam. When you close a client's books, you should protect them with a password to prevent unauthorized users from making changes. You can do this in the Advanced tab of Account and Settings by specifying the closing date, selecting Allow changes after viewing a warning, and entering password from the drop-down. Entering a password. Note that only the primary admin or a company admin, including an accountant user, can set, change, or remove a closing date, or change the password. What should you and your clients consider when setting a closing date? It's best to create or update a closing date when your client is fairly certain that all the day-to-day transactions for that period have been entered. The closed period also applies to non-posting transactions, such as estimates and purchase orders. Reconciliations can be conducted in closed periods without having to enter a password. Can you change a transaction dated on or before the closing date? After a closing date has been set, users with the correct permissions can add, edit, or delete a transaction dated on or before this date. In this situation, QuickBooks Online will do two things. Display a double-check the transaction date warning. If a closing date password has been set, QuickBooks Online will also ask the user to enter it here. Log the change in the exceptions to closing date report. Let's look at the exceptions to closing date report in more detail. The exceptions to closing date report. The exceptions to closing date report lists all the changes made to transactions before and including the closing date, and any made after the books were closed. The report allows you to track if any changes are made, regardless of whether the books are password protected or not. You'll only see details in the report when someone edits a transaction dated on or before your closing date. If the report shows nothing, no transactions were changed by any users in the company. Once you set the closing date, you can access the report through the Report Center in the For My Accountant section. If no closing date is set, the exceptions to closing date report won't be available. What happens if you change or remove the closing date? Changing the closing date erases the existing exceptions to closing date report and starts it again from scratch. You'll only be able to track changes that occur after the new closing date was set. If you remove the closing date altogether, not only will the exceptions to closing date report's contents be erased, but the report won't even be available to run. So it's not a good idea to remove the closing date. Running the exceptions to closing date report. Let's see how you can change a transaction after closing the books and how the exceptions to closing date report can identify this. Watch the video to see how it's done. The individual steps are below for you to follow. Let's go to the Expenses Center and change the amount of a transaction because this transaction date is prior to the company's closing date. A warning pops up. Enter the password set to protect the account, then select Yes. Now go to the Reports Center. In the For My Accountant section, select the Exceptions to Closing Date report. The report shows the audit history window and the details of the edit we just made. Summing up. Learning outcomes. Well done. In this lesson, we covered new training for period end activities, knowledge recap, the Books Review Center in QuickBooks Online Accountant, plus the Reclassified Transactions tool in QuickBooks Online can help you carry out period end reviews for clients. You and your clients can protect their books with a password to help prevent changes being made to transactions in a closed period. If any transactions are changed after period end, the client can identify them by running an exceptions to closing date report. Next steps. In the next lesson, we'll explore some recent updates to how you and your clients can migrate QuickBooks desktop company files to QuickBooks Online.